you were to ask any of the guys at Real World Wildlife Seed what their favorite food plot is, without a doubt they would all say soybeans. In fact, any serious land manager knows the value of soybeans. There are many good reasons for planting soybeans in your food plots. Soybeans represent a high-quality food source for whitetails from the time they sprout until the last grain is consumed.
But there's a big difference in those soybeans. Soybeans need to be the type that are high shadow resistant, meaning that the pods hold the beans in for late season. These beans are good from early season with the nutrition in the green leaves all the way through to the beans in the pods for late season.
We found those soybeans that were shadow resistant that stayed in those pods late, as Kevin mentioned, but we also selected varieties that had a high grain production. So there wasn't only beans that were in the pods, but there was a whole lot of beans in the pods. In fact, planted side by side, for 5 years in a row, I did side-by-side comparisons on my own farm with Forage soybeans and Real World soybeans once we found the beans that we wanted to take to market. And there was absolutely no comparison. I actually got tired of wasting my food plot space on the Forage soybeans, and I just quit doing it because they would lose the side-by-side trial every time. The Fleece family was the first family to ever grow a 300-inch buck in captivity. In fact, they grew the first two 300-inch bucks in captivity. And here's Shorty Fleece of the Fleece family and wilderness whitetails in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I've planted forage soybeans and you know, they'll eat the leaves, but there's no pod production. And that's the big downfall. I mean, you have a short window and, you know, when we get a frost up here and might be mid-September, they're done, you know, and then you have a plot with no attractive, you know, qualities to it. So the real world beans, they're attractive early, they're attractive late, they're attractive really late into the winter, and they're feeding and keeping the deer healthy throughout the winter, which is, I'm all about herd health and deer health. Healthier the animal, the bigger he's going to be next year, and the stronger the fawns are going to be next year. So yeah, when they have food in December, January, February, March, that's really important to me.
You know, I've seen where a lot of guys plant forage soybeans and then they plow them under in the fall and they plant something else. It's because they've never really tried a Real World soybean. If they'll just give it a try, I tell guys, plant a bag of Real World soybeans beside your forage soybean plot, let them stand and see what hunting over soybeans in the winter is really like. You'll have your summertime browse with the Real World beans, but you gain that pod production and you gain that excellent hunting season. Your late season, when everybody else is at home, you're out there hunting over them bean pods.
You know, one of the selling points on forage soybeans actually has been the quality of the browse, the high protein content of the browse. But we've done side-by-side tests all over the country, from North Dakota, just 20 miles from the Canadian border, clear out east into Pennsylvania. In these side-by-side trials, we've collected tissue samples of both the forage soybeans and the Real World soybeans right next to them. And I'm going to say at least 75–80% of the time, the Real World soybeans actually have more protein and total digestible nutrients in those samples than what the forage soybeans have. And then we've heard from customers all across the country that have taken our side-by-side challenge and planted forage soybeans next to Real World soybeans, and the deer come out and browse in the Real World soybeans a lot harder than they do the forage. In fact, we had one customer that went so far as to plant the first 30 feet around the edge of his field in forage soybeans, kept his Real World in the middle trying to protect him, and the deer would walk right through those forage soybeans. They got up to 4 or 5 feet tall, and in the middle was Real World soybeans eating down to 12 inches. So, you know, there was really no comparison in the forage, which is what the forage soybean system is built on. We often get the question is, what separates your Real World soybeans from typical ag soybeans? Why can't I just go to the neighboring farmer and get a bag of his beans and plant them? Why is yours so much better? Well, besides the testing for shadow resistance, we've got 3 varieties in our bag, and we do that to hedge our bets. If the conditions become such that one of those varieties shatters, well, we still got the other 2 varieties to fall back on that remain in the pod where the wildlife can get them. Now, if you would go and plant a farmer's soybeans and that variety happened to shatter that winter, you're left with absolutely nothing. There's a perception that forage soybeans stay green early in October and the deer are still on them, where the Real World soybeans turning yellow and the deer quit eating them and move on to other food sources. But we've got tons and tons of video footage showing that's not the case at all. We've got mature bucks all the way down to fawns still feeding in real world soybeans in early October as those beans are turning yellow. And the thing of it is, once that first frost hits those forage soybeans, they're done. There's nothing left. The forage is gone and the grain production is not there. Whereas the real world, you're still there with a prime food source into the winter months.
Another thing about our soybean blend is we use 3 different types of beans, whether it's our regular blend or a northern blend. Those group numbers are selected for them to mature at different stages. So we always have one that's a more mature bean in that bag, so that it'll have green leaves while the other ones are drying down. So you're always going to have some green leaf stage in those plots while the other plants are drying down, and then as they've dried down, they've got the pods to eat.
In Wisconsin here, it gets cold. Well, I mean, it will be 20, 30 below sometimes. So a good quality food source is extremely important, and there's really not a lot for them to eat in January, February, March when it's so cold. So having beans in the pods yet is absolutely critical. If they have to dig through the snow and pick them off the ground, they're not going to find them under 18 inches of snow. So that's probably one of the main reasons the real world beans are so important to me.
In 2017, we're introducing our Generation 2 soybeans. And I know the question is going to be out there, what makes the Generation 2 soybean blend different from what we've been selling in the past? And the answer to that's very simple. We've been selecting for the shatter resistance and the grain production, but we've started looking at a third component, and that is the fat content or oil production of that soybean. What's critical is that high oil content contains energy that's important to the wildlife in the winter when it's cold out, they're trying to stay warm, they're consuming those beans. The high oil soybean is much more attractive and palatable to the deer than a regular soybean. So now, instead of selecting for just shatter resistance and just grain production, we're also throwing in the oil content of the soybean. And that's what separates the Generation 2 from our previous blend.